Hello, everybody, and welcome in to today's episode of the Lions Grid. Same great show, brand new time. Joined today by Jeffrey and Joe. Gentlemen, how are you doing today?
Doing great.
Doing fantastic, except for having camera issues again. So the audience doesn't get to see my beautiful face, unfortunately.
I'm sure that is some people are hurt about that, but we'll get it figured out here. It's technology, IT, all that. It, uh, it's kind of like life. It finds a way to throw issues whenever it feels like it. So it's just one of those things. But we'll get over get over that adversity. And I also apologize because I did test positive for COVID this morning. So if I sound congested, do any coughing, any of that, I apologize. But feeling a little under the weather. But nevertheless, we will go through our regular show here, and of course, uh, you know, mentioned new time, same great show. We are going to shoot for the 6 o'clock time slot now on Thursdays moving forward, except for our Thanksgiving show, which will actually be on the Tuesday before Thursday. So we'll actually be seeing you usually it's a week between shows, but we'll be seeing you here in just a couple days as we talk about what happens in the Chicago Lions game as the Lions get ready to host the Packers on Thanksgiving. But with all that aside, let's take a look back and see what happened here in week 10 as we go ahead and grind the grid as we like to do. And so we'll put up the presentation here. We'll take a look back at this previous week's games. So starting things off on Thursday Night Football, we had the Carolina Panthers and the Chicago Bears. Both of these teams seem to be trying to improve their draft position. And, this was one of the rare cases where the Bears getting a win didn't hurt them because they have the Panthers' first round pick. So the Bears get this win 16-13, and it actually helps them in terms of their draft position, helping them secure that number one pick currently still in the upcoming draft. Then we had our second game played in Germany in as many weeks. We had the Colts and the Patriots in what was kind of a crummy game to export over to another country. 10-6, the final score there. Not a lot of excitement. In a very exciting AFC North matchup, we had the Browns and the Ravens square off, and the Browns were able to sneak out the win there, 33-31. Then we had the Packers traveling to Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers, and the Steelers won that game 23-19. We had the San Francisco 49ers squaring off against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and San Fran, fresh off their bye week, won that game 34-3. Chase Young looked pretty good in his debut with the 49ers there, helping that pass rush get home. Next up, we had the Houston Texans against the Cincinnati Bengals. The Texans got the win there 30-27. CJ Stroud takes down Joe Burrow. We had the Tennessee Titans and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa Bay ended a 4-game losing streak, winning this game 20-6. We had the Detroit Lions traveling to the Chargers and getting a West Coast win in a good old-fashioned shootout that we'll talk more about here in just a minute. The Lions winning this game 41-38. We had the Falcons traveling to Arizona, and Kyler Murray got a win in his first game back, 25-23, the final score there. The Cowboys hosted the Giants and made the Giants look like a JV squad again, winning this game 49-17. The Seahawks hosted the Commanders and got a win 29-6 in what was another exciting game from this past weekend. The Jets traveled to Las Vegas to play the Raiders, and the Raiders are now 2-0 after firing Josh McDaniels. They won that game 16-12. The Broncos beat the Bills on Monday Night Football in what was a surprising game because the Bills, their schedule's pretty tough and they need wins. You thought the Broncos could be a team they could beat. They lost that game 24-22. And then we had 4 teams on a bye: Kansas City, Miami, Philadelphia, and Los Angeles, the Rams, that is. And I just noticed also that I missed including in the presentation here, the Saints did travel to Minnesota to take on the Vikings, not to take away from Josh Dobbs because we will talk about him in our buy or sell segment, but he got another win for the Vikings. They won that game 27-19, the Vikings over the Saints. So that's everything that happened this past week in the NFL. Anything that really surprised either of you gentlemen in terms of outcomes? Jeff, let's start with you. Jeffrey, you might be on mute if you're talking.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Oh, yep, we can hear you now.
No. I Josh Dobbs getting that win there for Minnesota, I think was fantastic because he looked great in that. And you were right about the Giants looking about like a JV squad out there. They are bad.
Yeah, it was a rough one for him. Joe, anything surprise you from this last week of games?
The Detroit Lions did. I expected Los Angeles to win that game, and the Lions won the close game. It was amazing. It was like I didn't expect them to win a close game like that. Like typically they lose those games, and you say same old Lions. But this week, and if they can win clutch games like that, then they're a real Super Bowl contender. It's a big step up to win that football game that they won this week.
Yeah, trips out to the West Coast don't usually end well for the Lions, and the fact that the defense didn't play very well, but the offense was able to sort of pick them up and get that win was certainly something very refreshing to see. So we'll certainly talk more about that here in just a minute. But yeah, great.
Yeah,
great
we're not the same old Lions, but the Chargers are going to keep charging because they just absolutely live in those single possession games, and they always come out on the bottom.
And it is unfortunate, a couple plays can be the difference between a loss and a victory. And I think the Vikings earlier this season were another team that were in those close games. And while last season they did a good job of winning those close games, if you just a couple plays can sort of make the difference between a win and a loss. And as you're trying to chase people in the playoff rankings and standings, it can make all the difference in the world. So now we'll move into buy or sell here, gentlemen. And we have a couple of different questions. We talked about, or I mentioned, of course, the Bills losing to the Broncos. Um, Josh Allen was a big part of that, and of course, the Bills fired offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey after this game. But are you going to buy or sell the fact that Josh Allen is this current era in the NFL? That he is the Brett Favre of that era. Brett Favre was a Hall of Fame quarterback. He set the record for all-time touchdowns, but he also holds the record for all-time interceptions. So it's a little bit of you get the good with the bad, that gunslinger mentality. Are you buying or selling the fact that Josh Allen fits that mold? Jeff, let's start with you.
I am going to sell this right now. I think Josh Allen has turned into a turnover machine, especially this year, and the Bills' offense is all kinds of out of whack. I mean, there were so many fumbles, and they just the whole offense is a turnover machine actually. But I think Brian Dable, as their offensive coordinator when he was there, did a lot to get that offense clicking on all cylinders. But yeah, I think Ken Dorsey's offense. Other teams, I guess, in the media was saying that other teams are saying like they can kind of sit on what the Bills do because their offense is kind of simplistic now, and people and they're just people on their receiving core outside of Diggs aren't showing up. I'm gonna sell this. I think it's more of a function of what's going on around him. But if he keeps throwing picks, I might change my mind.
Joe, are you buying or selling this one?
I'm gonna have to buy this one. He's got a little bit of a different play style. He's more mobile, but he's got that aggressive, like you said, gunslinger mentality, and he's a little bit reckless with the football. And you look at his teams that he's played on. Generally, they're winning football teams, and they make the playoffs. And he's got a lot of years left to fulfill his stat sheet, and I can see him being a good quarterback in the NFL for a long time, one of the better ones in the league for a long time. Like Brett Favre, he's been on the cover of Madden, So, I would have to say this is a buy for me.
Yeah, I think it's. I think I buy as well here. It's not necessarily a bad thing, especially when you're talking about just the play of being compared to Brett Favre. Obviously, there's the good and the bad. Leading the league in career touchdown passes at one point, and then of course career interceptions. It's a little bit of fire and ice there, but I think Josh Allen, he's certainly one of those guys that you can love him when he's making the plays that are winning you games, and then sometimes you just sit there scratching your head when tries to make the same plays, but the outcome's different, and it turns into a turnover. So, um, I think he's uh, you know a very talented guy. I think he could win them a Super Bowl. Brett Favre won a Super Bowl. So doesn't mean that he's not a good QB, but I do think at times his willingness to his ability to get a little loose with the football certainly comes back to haunt him. But again, I think that's just because he's a really talented guy who, again, when things go great, he wins games. When things don't go great, he can lose you games. So it's just part of the life of having Josh Allen as your quarterback. Staying focused on quarterbacks here, gentlemen. The Browns did get that win against their AFC North rivals, the Ravens. But after that game, Deshaun Watson, they decided that they were going to sit him for the rest of the season. I think they were saying he was going to have surgery on the shoulder.
Yep, he's getting season-ending surgery.
Yep. So with that in mind, will his contract / the trade? Of course, he got the contract with the Texans and then was traded to the Browns. Will that go down as being one of the worst in NFL history? Are you buying or selling the fact that it will be one of the worst? Jeff, let's start with you. What are your thoughts here about what sort of legacy the Deshaun Watson will leave following that big contract and trade that happened?
I'm absolutely buying this. $230 million fully guaranteed. And at that time, it was the biggest contract ever. And the Browns, I mean, they went a pure football angle on this because, as many people know, Deshaun Watson had a bunch of off-the-field issues, some very serious charges against him, and he had to serve a suspension for it too. So off the field, he's doing them wrong. On the field, he has not been as good as he was in Houston. At least throwing the ball, he's not been pulling the trigger with his legs. He's not been running very much. Now, I will say this last game, he actually played pretty well. In the last couple games, he's looked a little bit more like he used to. But that's a lot of money to throw at this guy and to sell your soul for it. And it's only going to hurt them later because they owe him a lot of money. And it's going to be huge cap hits going forward.
Yeah, Joe, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I'd have to buy this as being one of the worst moves made by any team in NFL history, because to have that much money on the line guaranteed, and I don't know the total number of games that he's played for the Browns, but he hasn't played a full season. He's had suspensions. It's just been a complete and utter mess. Like, they're better off playing their backup. They're better off getting a backup or playing the third string guy, and he's closer or doing the same job that Deshaun Watson would do. I mean, to me, I think Deshaun Watson's a bum. The guy can't play football. He's not any good. He's overhyped. He's been paid way too much money, and to me, I didn't like the deal when it went down. I didn't like the signing. To me, it's like he hasn't proven anything in the NFL. What's the big news about Deshaun Watson? He's not a good person. He's not a good football player.
Yeah, I'm looking here. He's played 12 games in 2 seasons for Cleveland and has earned $92 million to play those 12 games. He's under contract through 2026, and he has $138 million left on his deal. And that is according to ESPN. And of course, with his injury, they will actually be starting a rookie quarterback, Dorian Thompson Robinson, DTR as he is known, will be getting the start. because they like his ceiling a little bit better than PJ Walker's, who has been for the most part filling in for Watson as he's been struggling a little bit this season prior to being shut down. And yeah, I'm definitely in the same group. Obviously with you guys buying here, because if you're going to pay a player that amount of money, I think the most important thing you're looking for out of them is for them to be on the field and to be sort of earning that contract. In between the suspension and then injury here, obviously there's a part of the game where you can't necessarily plan on injuries. You can certainly condition yourself and things like that to try and mitigate the risk, but injuries do happen. And they can be out of your control. But again, the things that he was accused of with the massage therapist and things like that, that very much in his control. So it's certainly, I think, going to be a head scratcher when people look back at this deal. And especially, it seems like the outcome isn't, we're not, it doesn't seem like we're heading towards Deshaun Watson leading the Browns to a Super Bowl anytime soon. So it's definitely a deal I think that isn't going to age well over time, and leave people scratching their heads as to why things went down the way they did.
It is kind of funny. They had Josh Dobbs at the beginning of the year, and they traded him to Arizona, and now Josh Dobbs is in Minnesota. Lighting it up.
All he does is win, and we'll talk a little bit about Josh Dobbs here in just a second. But speaking of free agent acquisitions, not necessarily a trade, Miles Sanders came off a pretty decent season with Philadelphia. He was one of the few running backs who got a payday this offseason. But his performance with the Panthers so far this season has been rather forgettable. Are you gentlemen buying or selling the idea that Miles Sanders is a prime example of why teams shouldn't pay running backs in the NFL? Joe, let's start with you on this one.
Yes, I agree. This is a buy. They shouldn't pay running backs. Running backs are essentially good for the first few years after they come out of the draft in the first 3 to 4 rounds. You can find free agent running backs that make it into the league somewhere later on down the line when they're like 26 to 30 years old. And the thing is, running backs is a hit or miss year. Every year it's a hit or miss for any given running back. To be a consistent running back in the NFL year after year for more than 3 years, that means you're one of the top tier running backs in the league. If you can get 1,000-yard season for 3 consecutive seasons, Ezekiel Elliott, kind of dropped off the map after he got paid, and Miles Sanders, he had a good season with Philadelphia, but it was the system around him that allowed him to be successful. And I'm just not for middle-aged running backs getting good deals. David Montgomery is a different story because we didn't even give him that good of a deal. We just gave him a couple of years or 2 or 3 years and paid him a decent amount of money, but we didn't overpay for him, and he's gonna be good. He was good in Chicago, and he's gonna be good for the years he's with Detroit. He's had some injuries, but if you're playing running back in the NFL, playing wide receiver in the NFL, you're gonna get injuries. Offensive line, people are gonna roll your ankles. It's a standard of injury prone and production and how many hits you can take. They talk about quarterbacks taking hits. They take far fewer hits than running backs. But running backs, if they carry the ball 30 times a game, they're getting hit 30 plus times a game. It takes a wear and tear on the body.
Definitely not easy being a running back in the NFL. Jeff, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think this is evidence that the league will not continue to pay running backs for their offenses. Joe's absolutely right. It's like one of those brutal positions. After those first couple of years, 3 years, when they're good, they sign contracts, and they've got 3 years worth of wear and tear on them. I mean, Derrick Henry's kind of an anomaly that he's still beasting it out, and he gets like 300 carries a season or something like that. But that's not the norm.
Mm-hmm.
Though I do think that, and this is just my opinion, that because of the wear and tear on the body of that position, I think they should get paid more because they they are doing quite a bit because run games are important still in the NFL. And they do a lot in the passing game. They do, especially now, and they do a lot in the pass protection. So I think they should get paid more in general. But I don't think the league will pay running backs like that anymore.
Yeah, it's almost like they should be paid on sort of the inverse of the normal scale for players, right? Usually when you come into the league, you come in on a rookie contract, which is definitely more favorable to the organization that drafted you. And then with the idea that if you play well on that rookie contract, you'll be rewarded with a bigger contract in your next go around. Because of how running backs are used in sort of, as we've sort of talked about here, the fact they have a couple years of shelf life before that really starts to take a toll on them. It's almost like they should have the ability to sign more lucrative contracts as they're coming into the league, with the knowledge that, hey, that's probably going to be their biggest contract, and then from there it'll probably go down. Because I think you guys are absolutely right. Outside of a few running backs who are Hall of Fame running backs, LaDainian Tomlinson, Adrian Peterson, those guys who are able to be that multi-year starter who can consistently rush over 1,000 yards. Those guys are rare. That's not every starting running back in the NFL. So it can make it difficult when you're looking at free agency. If you think a guy might be one of those caliber of players, of course you can take a swing and miss on a deal. But I think unfortunately Miles Sanders was the top multi-year contract signed this previous offseason for a running back. He's getting $25.4 million over for the 4-year deal. So it could be just another example teams point to as to why they don't want to pay those running backs those big second contracts, because right now it's certainly not paying off for the Panthers. Miles Sanders just not putting up the numbers they were hoping for. But something that is working a little better, or maybe even better than they hoped for, the Las Vegas Raiders. Of course, they fired Josh McDaniels. He was the first casualty of our hot butts list. Antonio Pierce is now 2-0 as the head coach for the Raiders. Are you gentlemen buying or selling the fact that this coaching change has made a huge difference for the Raiders? Jeff, let's start with you.
I'm absolutely buying this. Josh McDaniels lost the locker room by the end of his tenure there. People were about to mutiny. But Antonio Pierce has been doing fantastic. I mean, pretty much like the next week, like there were like film at practice where like everybody was like getting along. They were smoking cigars in the locker room. Like I think McDaniels suffered like most other Belichick tree coaches suffer as they come in trying to be a stiff disciplinarian, old school kind of person, but you have to be able to relate with your players, or you have to be able to get results. And the offense looked absolutely terrible when Josh McDaniels was in charge of the offense, and when they had the interim head coach come in, I mean, he went around and he like talked to players as far as like what they like to run. Like Josh Jacobs, their running back, was like, no, like McDaniels never asked me like what my strengths, weaknesses are, what I like to do, don't like to do. Like he was very much like it's my way or the highway. But Antonio Pierce is a players coach, and I think he absolutely has changed that culture around almost immediately.
Yeah, Joe, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with Jeff on the majority of what he said. I believe he lost the locker room, and and then the Raiders' new head coach. I think he's done a good job at being motivating the team. And anytime you go through a head coaching change, even if it is somebody that's been with the team, that makes the role change to leader of the football team. It brings a whole new culture, brings a whole new environment. The team rallies around it. He wouldn't be promoted to heavy head coach if it wasn't in agreement with the players. So obviously he must have had a repertoire with the players beforehand, and he's made a big impact because the players are playing better football. Obviously, because they got 2 consecutive wins. This is a buy for me, but still, it's the Raiders, and they got a lot of areas where they're missing talent and where they're inconsistent. I wouldn't overhype this. It's just 2 games. it could be just a string of luck, but we'll have to watch throughout the remainder of the season. He's got an opportunity to win the head coaching role, depending on how he performs this season with the team. So as of right now, it's a buy, but it's conditional.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point that the AFC West is a very competitive division, especially now if the Raiders are getting things turned around. The Broncos have been looking really good lately. Ever since they gave up 70 points, they've decided to wake up and be a team again. So it's going to be interesting to see how high their ceiling can be this season, given how they started. But certainly Antonio Pierce has seemed to turn things around there. And I think it makes a great case for why more players should be elevated to a head coaching position sooner. You look at Dan Campbell, you look at Antonio Pierce, Mike Vrabel. There are plenty of head coaches out there that I think have really shown that they are great leaders for those locker rooms. And then organizations have shown that the way that you help them be successful is then you get coordinators who are very good with the X's and O's, sort of the playmaking side of things, to help them on that front. Because I think it really is a challenge to come in and lead a locker room, to lead a group of 53 men, and be able to get them on the same page and buy into a vision or a culture. And Antonio Pierce seems like he's been able to really flip that switch from taking it from a toxic situation in that locker room to something that's now productive with a 2-game winning streak. Um, it's night or day between where they were at and where they are now. So, if anything, for me, this is a signal that, hey, if you're thinking about a head coach, because we'll take a look at our hot butt section. There's a lot of people on the hot seat. So if you're looking to replace some of them, you might want to start with a former player, because so far they've been there's a lot of examples of them doing it right here in recent years. Speaking of doing it right, we mentioned we'd bring up Josh Dobbs again, bringing up Sam Howell here as well, because they're both two guys who I think coming into the season that I personally didn't really think very highly of. Sam Howell is leading the league currently in passing yards. Josh Dobbs, of course, came over to the Vikings and now has them on a 2-game, or is continuing their winning streak, and has won his last 2 games playing for them. Are you buying or selling the fact that both Josh Dobbs and Sam Howell are legitimate starting QBs here in the NFL? Joe, let's start with you on this one. What are your thoughts about Josh Dobbs and Sam Howell?
Yeah, Sam Howell's really the surprise of the league this year. Starting for Washington and being able to play competitive football. He's challenged Philadelphia. I don't know about his numbers, but every game that he seems to play in with Washington, they seem to be competitive and in the game to win it. So he's got some wins under his belt, and he's a legitimate starting quarterback in the NFL. So that one's a buy. But Josh Dobbs, he's got some wins under his belt with a couple different teams. And he's a player that has bounced around a traverse starter. Going from backup, third string, second string starter this year. He's made a big impact and has climbed up the ranks of the ladder. And it's just good to see that we're getting some new young talent and some new faces in the NFL that can play competitive football at the quarterback position. So this is a buy for me.
It looks like Edward here is in agreement with you, Joe. He's going to buy as well after last week in the discussion with you. I'm assuming with Joe here is you, Joe, Ron Dobbs, and the Vikings offense has been rolling here. And they don't even have Justin Jefferson at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when he comes back. Jeffrey, what are your thoughts?
I absolutely agree. I think these guys are both good starting quarterbacks. Sam Howell, this is real. He was in the league last year. He only started 1 game, like at the very end of the season. So this is basically his rookie year as far as like snaps and actual game action. But he's playing really well behind a really bad offensive line. I mean, he's been sacked 47 times, I think, and the record's 97.
Yep,
that's pretty ridiculous. But I mean, he's balling out. He's got kind of a gunslinger mentality. He's willing to put it all out there. He's definitely a surprise, and I'm looking forward to kind of seeing him bring back that franchise.
Yeah, it's certainly to your point, Jeffrey. The fact that he's been hit so much and is out there sort of shrugging that off and still putting up big numbers. I think all Lions fans remember Joey Harrington, and he was a quarterback who certainly suffered from the fact that we had a terrible offensive line and was constantly hearing footsteps because he was getting hit all the time. And obviously, that impacted his career. He was not able to be that same level of quarterback that he was at Oregon in the NFL because he was just getting obliterated all the time. It hasn't seemed to really impact Sam Howell. He's still finding ways to get things done. Obviously, I think when you look at the record of the Commanders, I think they're 4-6, so it's not the greatest in terms of the results. But he has gone the distance, as Joe pointed out, with the Eagles, really pushing them to their limits. So I think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic about him. And then Josh Dobbs, it'll be interesting to see what happens the remainder of the season. Obviously, the Lions haven't had a chance to play the Vikings yet. So it'll be interesting to see how we do against them with Josh Dobbs at QB. But I think there's certainly both these guys have shown that they are, if I was the New York Jets, as we were talking about before the show here, I would definitely welcome either one of these guys as a starting QB at the moment over Zach Wilson. So definitely think they are legitimate starters right now in the league. Going from the discussion about legitimate starters to legitimate chances to be Super Bowl champions, this was a question that I saw. It was on the ticket earlier this week, and it was also based off of what Tony Romo said during the Chargers game this past weekend, where he said that the Lions are one of the few teams that could win a Super Bowl. So the first part of the question here, gentlemen, is how many teams do you think actually could win the Super Bowl this year? Obviously, it can only be one team that ultimately wins it, but how many teams do you actually think have a legitimate chance to win? And do you include the Lions in that list of teams? Jeff, let's start with you here.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of parity in this league this year. I mean, the AFC North, every team is 7-3, 6-3, 6-3. The worst is actually the Bengals, who play tonight 5-4. They needed this win absolutely, but I think as far as NFL or Super Bowl caliber teams, I believe we're one of them. I think we're built like a powerhouse, especially on offense. We're stacking wins now. Minnesota kind of scares me a little bit that they're rolling now, but I think by the time we play them at the end of the year and like twice in the span of 3 weeks, I think. So that'll be an interesting end of our season with those divisional matchups. But I think there are a lot of teams that could win, but I think that we are one of like the top 3. I would say 3 to 5.
Very good. What are your thoughts here, Joe?
Yeah, I think there's really 5 teams you got to look out for. I think it's Dallas, Baltimore, Kansas City, Philadelphia, and Detroit. Not in that order, but those are 5 teams that have a chance to win the Super Bowl this year. In my opinion, they all have had big games. They've all been able to play dominant football, and they're the most exciting teams in the NFL. And we know once we get to the playoffs, we need excitement, we need crowds, we need fans behind them, we need playmakers, and every one of those teams has players in position to win a Super Bowl. Probably the most unattractive quarterback of the bunch is Jared Goff, simply because he's more of a dominant game manager. He's able to manage the game and still get the victories. But, he's got something to prove too, because he's been in a Super Bowl with LA. And, they lost that game against the Patriots in a low scoring affair. So he's kind of got the drive to get back to the Super Bowl and win with the franchise that's never won the Super Bowl. So, yeah, Lions are that's a buy. They have a chance to win the Super Bowl this year. They're one of the teams that should be counted as a Super Bowl contender.
Looks like Edward is echoing a similar feeling there. He also has 5 teams: the Lions, Kansas City, the Cowboys, Eagles, and Ravens. And also feels that it's wide open amongst them, and then it really comes down to who will be able to stay healthy over this remainder of the season. And I think I'm in a similar boat as well. I'm actually going to expand it out. I think there are 7 teams that I could see winning the Super Bowl this year. Starting in the AFC, and it's not in any particular order, just naming them off. I think the Dolphins could win. I think they are probably their offense has been really good. Their defense is the thing that gives me pause there, but I could see them in the right circumstances getting the win. The Chiefs and the Ravens, who have been on some other lists. And then from the NFC, I do like the Eagles, the Cowboys, the 49ers, and the Lions. So those are my sort of teams. So the Lions I have in there as well. And I think any one of those teams, if they end up being their representative for their particular division, or their conference, I think they have an opportunity to get a win there. I wouldn't be necessarily surprised if any one of those teams was able to get a Super Bowl win. Joe, it's funny you should mention Jared Goff, because the next question here is it's a two-parter again, and it is Jared Goff the most underrated player in the NFL, and should the Lions extend Jared Goff? So a little bit of a two-parter there. Yeah, and I guess let's jump into it. Jeff, what are your thoughts here? Do you think Jared Goff is underrated, and do you think that the Lions should show him the money?
This is an interesting one. I do think he's underrated as far as being overlooked when we're looking at like top tier quarterbacks. I do agree he does kind of skew more towards a game manager. But, I mean, if he's given time and the play action's going, I mean, he absolutely will tear you apart. I mean, clearly this game showed that. But as far as extending him, that's an interesting question. I think they will extend it if we get a playoff run in with him. But I'm not sure who's on free agency coming up this year as far as quarterbacks go. But, I mean, if something's tantalizing out there, I could see Brad Holmes taking a move. But I think if we make the playoffs, definitely if we win a championship, we're going to extend him.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think a lot of it will come down to sort of what he is able to do, um, long term this season. What sort of ceiling the Lions are able to reach. I'm sure that will impact the decision here. But Joe, what are your thoughts here and now in week 11 of the NFL season? Do you think Jared Goff's being underrated, and do you think he should be extended by the Lions?
I think he is being underrated. I think he's proven that he can put up the numbers, and more importantly than the numbers, he can get the wins. He got the wins with LA. He's getting the wins with Detroit. You know, how many seasons has he been with Detroit? 3, and he's already having 2 winning seasons. The rebuild in Dan Campbell's first year, all the way to season 3 with the team. He's proven that he can win football games. He's a little bit shaky when you put pressure on him. But should the Lions extend Goff, I really see an open window, and I think the most notable year that he has to win the Super Bowl with Detroit is this year. Now that's contingent on whether or not they do win the Super Bowl this year, because if they do, then it's like, okay, then they have the hype going into next year about trying to repeat and keeping some of their players, and they're no longer the rebuild franchise. And if they're no longer the rebuild franchise, so if we win a playoff game, if we win the division, if we make a run in the playoffs, yes, he's signable, but he's not like, huge contract signable, because if things go in a south direction, we want to be able to trade him away in that contract, and thus, do a little bit of a patch in place job with Hendon Hooker. We drafted him in the 3rd round. He's a mobile quarterback. He's exciting. So, we also have him in our back pocket in case, a couple of years down the line, Jared Goff doesn't work out. But I really see the best opportunity to win the Super Bowl is this year with Jared Goff, and that will really determine whether or not he's re-signable.
Yeah, I think if you look across the NFL and specifically the NFC North, Jared Goff, I think, is the best quarterback in the NFC North, especially with Kirk Cousins hurt. So I think re-signing him makes a lot of sense. I think it gives you stability that the other franchise in your division are sort of desperately looking for. And as long as he can maintain this level of play that we've seen over the last few seasons, I think he's a great person to have behind center for the Lions. He's definitely been a part of this turnaround that we've seen with the franchise. And really, we gotta, trading Matt Stafford away for him and a first round pick uh, was a fantastic trade by Brad Holmes. We sort of lucked out there. Uh, you know, I think if the line should extend him, I don't think an extension is really going to. It will probably make him one of the higher paid quarterbacks in the NFL, but I don't necessarily think you're going to have to go all out and make him like the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, which is nice. Unfortunately, I think the market is going to dictate that he's probably going to get more money than I would think that a quarterback. He's going to get a lot of money because he's a quarterback. But I don't think you're necessarily going to see him get like the Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow type deal, where they're setting the new standard for the highest paid player in the NFL. So I expect again a big part of it. I agree with what Jeff said about them probably going to wait until the end of the season to really evaluate and at that point in time make a decision there. And everything that I've seen online has also suggested that they're waiting to have the serious contract talks until the end of the season. So Joe, I agree that this season is the Lions' best opportunity that I can remember in my lifetime for them to make a run. But I think keeping Jared Goff around sets them up to have some pretty good opportunities here in the next couple of years as well. And also, it gives a chance for Hendon Hooker, like you mentioned, Joe, gives us a chance to sort of evaluate him and see what we might potentially have there in a younger quarterback. And then if we, whether we decide to go the Hooker route or if we decide to go with another younger QB in a later draft, it gives us time there to find the successor and not necessarily rush things. So I'm all for it. And Edward chimed in here saying Goff is underrated for sure. He likes the idea of the mobile quarterback, though, that you brought up there, Joe. And of course, agrees that we should wait till the end of the season, and we might just have to go the Jerry Maguire route and show him the money. So we'll see how things pan out, but certainly an interesting discussion. Sticking with the Lions here, this past week, both Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery looked impressive. But are you buying or selling the fact that Jahmyr Gibbs will finish the season as the Lions RB1, taking that spot over from David Montgomery? I'm sure both of them, as long as they're healthy, will be heavily featured in this offense. But do you think Gibbs is starting to move the needle into the direction of him getting the Lions' share of the handoff and work there? Joe, what are your thoughts here?
No, I do not think he will be the starting number one running back for a few reasons. Number one is because when you start out a football game, you want a player that can wear down the defense. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs is an elusive, quick speed back. He's best utilized in the play action, in the draw, in the receiving game, as where David Montgomery is the ground and pound, the workhorse. He plays the physical game. And in football is a physical game. It's great to have the tandem, the duo, the ground and pound and the speed back. We had that last year with Jameer Williams and DeAndre Swift. But after evaluating this year, I can say the Lions did succeed in upgrading that combo, and I just don't think that Jahmyr Gibbs is the every down back. I think he's more like third down and special unit to screen unit, and receiving game. So no, he won't end the season as Lions number one.
Gotcha. What are your thoughts here on this one, Jeff?
I agree with Joe. The Lions like to run a power run game here, and that's most of the kind of sets, especially when David Montgomery's there, because he is a bruiser. And especially in the red zone, I mean, look what happened and how many points we scored once we got him back. Like they absolutely are built with our line to power rush that thing into to get those tutties at the end of those drives instead of field goals. So I think I agree with Joe also that Jahmyr Gibbs being the more elusive back, I think he will be kind of the change of pace back. Now I know he's a first round pick change of pace back, but it's good to have this kind of problem here because we have two. Well, I think David Montgomery is elite, and Jahmyr Gibbs, who's kind of proven himself to be one of the speedier guys out there. But I think David Montgomery, unless he gets injured, will still be our RB1.
Yeah, this one is a tough one for me. I think obviously, like I said, I think they're going to continue to utilize both of these running backs as much as they can, as long as they're both healthy. Um, I think Jahmyr Gibbs has surprised me a little bit because I definitely, obviously he has shined as being that more athletic, sort of the lightning to the thunder combo there. But he has also shown that he can run in between the tackles and be a physical runner, despite not being known as being that bruiser back like Montgomery. But it's a great problem to have. So whether or not he actually climbs to the top of the depth chart by the end of the season, or if he's able to continue to generate production and sort of pass Montgomery in terms of yardage and stuff like that. It'll be interesting to see. But yeah, I think I'll play on the safe side and I'll sell this one like you two on this one because I'm not sure if he can sort of as long as everyone stays healthy. I'm not sure if he'll replace Montgomery as the number one back. But I think they may move to a system where it's sort of a 1A, 1B type situation where they're both sort of looked at as being very, very important parts. And, I could see it going either way. You start out with Jahmyr Gibbs early in a game and get defenses tired because they're always running after them. And then you just bring in Montgomery and shove it down their throat, in the second half. Or it'd be something where, you use Montgomery in the first half to tire him out and then you bring in Gibbs in the second half and let him run wild. So I think the Lions are sort of spoiled for choice there, and it'll be interesting to see how they use the two running backs because in that game against the Chargers, I know on one of the fourth downs that the Lions went for, they blew that Chargers defensive line. Like they reset the line of scrimmage so that it was like 3 yards past the marker, and it was like, okay, I could almost run that for that first down. So having Gibbs and Montgomery behind there is really going to, I think, be.
It was a 4th and 7.
Yeah, and they dominated. So having these two guys healthy running behind that offensive line is going to be fantastic. And then Edward here chimed in with depends on what the offense is doing. He likes the high-scoring games with Gibbs, the grinded-out games with Montgomery, and he thinks that Montgomery will still be the one at the end of the year, but he could see that tide turning next year, depending on how things go. And so, with that in mind, and talking a little bit about last week's game against the Chargers, we'll go ahead here and we'll transition and start moving that direction. We'll do our hot butt section. And we do have a couple of new names on the list that we decided to add based off of last week's show. A lot of the names are, of course, still the same. Of course, we have Josh McDaniels, our first casualty, but Matt Eberflus, of course, still there. Ron Rivera, Dable still there. Belichick, Vrabel, Frank Reich, Brandon Staley, who, looking at their season, they're running out of games, so they need to get wins in order to make the playoffs. So the Lions may have helped him on his way out of Los Angeles. We'll have to see. Sean McDermott, of course, is one of the new additions. The Bills head coach. Is going to be interesting to see how things play out there. Of course, they've already moved on from Ken Dorsey, the offensive coordinator, so changes may be coming to the organization. Arthur Smith, they lost that game to the Cardinals, and they were using Bijan a little bit more, but still just weird vibes coming out of Atlanta. And then Todd Bowles, he did get a win, so the Buccaneers are looking a little better, but certainly going to be interesting to see, how the season plays out there. Because at one point in time, Tampa Bay was in first place in the NFC South and looking good, and then they went on a 4-game losing streak. So we'll have to see what Todd Bowles and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers can do over the course of the rest of the season to get him off this hot butts list. In terms of the King of the North, of course, the Lions are still reigning from our frozen throne up here in the NFC North. Um, taking a look at the records, obviously the our most worrisome opponent as those Vikings. They're 6-4 and on a 5-game winning streak. Both the Packers and the Bears. It may be getting a little too late in the season for them to do much of anything. Of course, we are playing the Bears this Sunday, so dealing them a loss here will be pretty important to making sure that they don't threaten us for supremacy in the NFC North. But we'll certainly have to keep an eye on those Vikings because they are keeping things interesting, and we're hoping that Kirk Cousins' injury would help us create some distance there. But they are lurking there just in the shadows, potential usurpers of our throne. But we started to touch on things from the game against the Chargers. We'll sort of walk through that a little bit here quickly before we take a look forward to this game against Chicago. But it was a good old-fashioned shootout, gentlemen, that we saw play out at SoFi Stadium. Again, the Lions able to get that win off the kick by Riley Patterson for the last play of the game to get that 41-38 win. Of course, we improved to 7-2 on the season. We saw some big days out of offensive players. We totaled 533 yards on offense, 200 of those on the ground, split between Gibbs and Montgomery. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown also had a big day receiving. I want to say he finished with 156 yards on 8 receptions, including his 20-yard touchdown in the third quarter. And it was Brown's 4th straight 100-yard game and his 6th in a 7-game span. So 6 out of his last 7 games, he's recorded over 100 yards receiving. Pretty impressive stuff out of him. And it was good to see the offense step up and help us in the shootout because the defense was nowhere to be found. In particular, gentlemen, I think one area of worry was the fact that one of the areas of improvement that have been on this team is our pass rush. There have been a couple of games where we have done really well, and then there have been games where our pass rush has been non-existent. And this was unfortunately one of those games where the pass rush didn't show up. Justin Herbert dropped back 40 times during this game, and the Lions did not sack him, and they only got 1 tackle for a loss on those 40 dropbacks. The Lions have posted 21 sacks in their first 8 games in the season, but 18 of those came in 3 games. So that means they had 1 sack in 3 of the other games, and so it's been an interesting thing. This pass rush, obviously, the Lions did sign Bruce Irvin, former Seattle Seahawk, to try and help out with this pass rush. But gentlemen, do you think the Lions should have been more aggressive at the trade deadline to acquire help for the pass rush? You look at Chase Young now with the 49ers. He's been contributing. Montez Sweat has already contributed to the Bears. And, of course, we'll get to see him firsthand this weekend. Do you think the Lions should have done more than just signing Bruce Irvin off the free agency to try and help out this unit that seems to be struggling here? Let's start with you, Jeff. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I would have liked to have seen him go after Montez Sweat. As far as Chase Young, I don't think he kind of fit the culture that Dan Campbell's setting. In Washington, there were a lot of reports of him just freelancing on plays and not following assignments. Although he can break a game with how good he is, I think this team is looking for more discipline out than that. So I also do believe in Brad Holmes' vision. I mean, he's clearly trying to homegrown a lot of our talent here, and I also have to, unfortunately, call out the refs, too. They are doing Aiden Hutchinson dirty. There's a lot of holding and penalties that they're not being called on him. But, we can't blame the refs on everything. So I would have liked to have seen it, but I also think that we're definitely building for the future with playing all these young guys.
What are your thoughts here, Joe?
I think that what they did at the deadline was acceptable. I don't think we really needed to add anybody on the defensive line because, we have anywhere from the starting four all the way to 10 different defensive linemen, including defensive ends, at any point in time can show up and get a sack. Benito Jones, Akil McNeil, uh, Romeo Okwara, Julian Okwara, Charles Harris, Aiden Hutchinson, and Levy Onzuwini. Just a matter of whether or not they're healthy or not. And I really think that this defensive line is led by Liam McNeil and Aiden Hutchinson, most notably Aiden Hutchinson. But I just think it's a matter of getting the timing right, getting the right combination, getting the right packages on the field for defense. It's still a work in progress for Detroit's defense. They're still figuring things out and learning how to become more elite of a defense. So I think what they did at the trade deadline, adding the wide receiver Donovan Peoples Jones, was a good move. I'm not really liking Marvin Jones right now. I think they need to release him and free up that cap space if they don't have a signing bonus on him or whatever. But I think the Lions made a good move, and I think that they're set in depth and they can have pressure on the quarterback at any given football game. It's just a matter of the other team's schemes defending the offense at any point in time.
Yeah, I think the big thing that I'm sort of looking for is consistency out of that pass rush, and you know, would I have liked to see them be more aggressive? In theory, yes, but we not sure what the asking price would have been in able to being able to take someone like Montez Sweat away from the Bears or even Chase Young, and I do think one of the things that would be encouraging about Chase Young is that I've heard since he's been with the 49ers, he's sort of been blown away by their organization and the way they do things. And he seems to be coming into the fold. So I would hope that the Lions would be able to do something similar with him. He would come in and sort of turn over a new leaf if they had pursued him. But again, I think also one thing that's interesting to keep an eye on. I think some people were feeling that maybe James Houston, the second year edge rusher, might have been coming back sooner. And I heard from Dan Campbell that it's more likely that he won't be ready until the end of December. Getting him back will certainly help out with that pass rush. But that may have also played into the reason why they didn't necessarily feel like they had to make a move in, with the trading. Perhaps they thought they were going to get James Houston back sooner, but it seemed like the fracture that he suffered is just causing him to miss a little bit more time to be totally healed and back out on the field. So, it'll be interesting. Hopefully, Dan Campbell seems very confident in Aaron Glenn's ability to get the team and unit ready for the next week. So, we'll trust in the team and see what they can do here against the Bears. And then last but not least here, gentlemen, as we take a look back at this Chargers game, do you think that it was the most impressive performance by the Goffense all season long? What are your thoughts here on that one, Jeffrey?
I think it's a return to form from what we were seeing in the beginning of the year, and actually a little bit better because we were completing these drives with touchdowns instead of field goals. David Montgomery made a big difference for us, got the play action game going. Jahmyr Gibbs obviously contributed. Amon-Ra St. Brown, the sun god, got a career high. It looked very impressive. Defense scares me, but offense is clicking.
What are your thoughts, Joe? Was this the most impressive performance by the Lions offense to date?
Yes, because it was a full game production. It was a full game that they had to play in order to win this one. And that's what's impressive. They put up points in the third quarter. They You know, they scored at the end of the game. You know, they put up 41 points total. You know, yes, this was the most complete game by the Lions offense this year. They handled adversity and they came out with the victory.
I agree. I think not only did they put up the yards and the points needed, but they also made the plays when they had to. They converted a lot of fourth downs. They made sure that they had the ball at the end of the game to kick the winning field goal as time expired. I think the offense came out here and sort of was the hero we needed in the moment because the defense, while has certainly played well at other points in the season, we're definitely struggling here against the Chargers because Keenan Allen and Justin Herbert were also having some success on fourth downs, and we're finding ways to make plays. But thankfully, our offense was able to make even more plays and get us the win. So I definitely think this was the most impressive win for the offense in particular, just because I think they did the most to help secure it in there. It was definitely they were a crucial part of leaving Los Angeles and SoFi Stadium with a win. So with that in mind, gentlemen, who are your champs and chumps from this week? I'll start with mine. My champ, and I'm picking specific units. I'm going with the offensive line. As a unit across the board, we're really good. Again, Penei Sewell in particular played really well. He had 20 dropbacks where he was matched up with either Khalil Mack or the Bosa. I'm not sure. Is it Nick or Joey Bosa that plays for the Chargers?
Joey.
Joey. So he had 20 dropbacks against both of them and gave up 0 pressures and 0 sacks. So they did a very good job because that Chargers pass rush is no joke. And so they did a good job of giving Jared Goff time to make plays. And then, of course, we already talked about on that 1 4th down where they just completely drove that defensive line like 7 yards off the original line of scrimmage and making it easy to convert. So, yeah, my champs, the Lions offensive line. My chump was the Lions pass rush. Again, having those 40 dropbacks and only getting 1 tackle for a loss. I know Aiden Hutchinson is getting a lot of the attention. In games we've seen plenty of people step up in the past, but for whatever reason, coming off the bye that week against the Chargers, we just weren't able to get home against the QB. So something that hopefully we'll see fixed here against the Chargers. But my champ, the offensive line. My chump, the pass rush. Jeff, who do you have?
My champ this week, I like to go out in the NFL for these for some reason, is Josh Dobbs. I mean, what he's been able to do this season alone, traveling around all these teams, balling out. He's on a much better team than the Cardinals right now than what he was. But the fact that what he's done and gave some juice to Minnesota here, I got to give him the champ, even though it pains me because they're in the same division. But I am a fan of the Pastronaut. My chump is the Lions defense overall. I know a lot of it. I know most of it was on the pass rush, but it would have been nice to see our secondary make some plays out there. So yeah, those are my chumps.
Very nice. And Joe, before we turn it over to you, we have Edward chiming in here. His chump being MSU versus James Madison. Yep, that's quality. In general, MSU basketball could just be your chump because they have not looked good in this early season. In his champ, the Lions offense. Joe, who do you have as your champ and who do you have as your chump?
My champ is Riley Patterson for kicking the game-winning field goal and also making other field goals throughout the game. If he wouldn't have, if we wouldn't have been able to make those, we wouldn't have won the game. And then my chump is, I keep wanting to say San Diego, but LA Chargers head coach. I think that he's won some football games with the team, but this was a chance for him to turn the season around against a good team in Detroit, and they might end up like Tampa Bay and Atlanta, going on a losing streak now after losing to Detroit, after building some midseason momentum. So that's my chump, is the head coach of LA Chargers.
Yeah, it's certainly I think they're in that same sort of position like the Bills and some of those other teams that are kind of teetering on whether or not they're going to be able to make a playoff push. They have a difficult schedule ahead of them, and so getting wins when you can get them is important. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Brandon Staley. He's on our hot butts list for a reason. So transitioning now, gentlemen, to our game against Chicago. Of course, the Lions are hosting them on Sunday. Uh, the Lions and Bears have played 186 times in the regular season and playoffs. The Bears lead the all-time series with 104 games. The Lions have won 77, and we've tied 5 times. Most recently, the Lions swept the Bears last season, and hopefully we'll be able to do again this season. So we'll keep an eye on that. Um, in terms of injury news, it's reported that Justin Fields is close to a return. We'll have to see. He had a dislocated thumb on his throwing hand. Um, with it, them having coming off the Thursday night game, there's some chatter out there that he may be ready to go the Sunday against the Lions. So something to keep an eye on there. And also their defense is getting healthier as well with safety Eddie Jackson, cornerbacks Kyler Gordon and Jalen Johnson coming back after missing multiple games with injuries. They're also hoping that their linebacker Tremaine Edmonds will be back from a knee injury. So they're getting healthier. The Bears are. The Lions. One thing that I saw was that Vitae is going to be shut down for the season with a back injury. But otherwise, the Lions are looking pretty healthy. Of course, they got most of their starters back last week and didn't necessarily suffer anything too crazy in the game. So both these teams are pretty healthy coming into this game. Of course, the Bears also, this will be another game, full week of practice with Montez Sweat on the team. He had 8 pressures against the Panthers in his debut for the Bears. So it gives him another game of, or another week of experience with his teammates and in this defense. It'll be interesting to see. Obviously, I think our offensive line has proven that they can handle elite pass rushers, with what they were able to do against Bosa and Khalil Mack. So not too worried about it. I think the potential of having Justin Fields return to the game. Obviously, he's a dual threat quarterback. He's definitely struggled at points during the season with turnovers, and of course, the Bears weren't having much luck in the win column when he was behind center. But does Justin Fields returning? Do you think having this be his first game back from injury? Do you think that's an advantage for the Lions, or do you think it should be something that you should be worried about if Justin Fields suits up for the team this weekend? What are your thoughts on that, Joe? Let's start with you.
Yeah, I think it's a dangerous threat. He hasn't played in a while. He's going to want to put together a good performance. He's a dual threat quarterback. Lions have struggled against them this season. Are we going to be able to play contain on him if he comes back? But Chicago hasn't been that great of a football team, but still they got something to prove. If they beat Detroit, they're feeling good about themselves. So no football game any given week is a guaranteed win.
Mm-hmm.
You still got to go out there and play. These are NFL football teams, and I think that Justin Fields is more of a threat than the backup they got playing for Chicago right now. So yeah, it's going to be more difficult if he comes back.
What are your thoughts about that, Jeffrey? Do you think it's an advantage or disadvantage having Justin Fields return from injury?
I think it doesn't matter who they put back at quarterback. I think we're going to roll them this week. It's going to be a good get right game for us. No cardiac cats this week. I think we take care of business easily. Dan Campbell earlier this week told his family, this is based on his kind of aggressive nature on 4th down. He's like, he tells his family, just wear a diaper before some of these games. Put them on and be ready to roll. It's not going to be one of those games. No diapers. We're going to go out there and roll them.
Now, it's definitely an NFC North game, so it's a rivalry game. I think those definitely bring a little bit of added pressure. But to your point, Jeffrey, I think this, if you look at the spread, according to BetMGM, the Lions are favored by 7.5. So definitely they're favored in the game to win. Matt Eberflus has yet to win a game against an NFC North opponent as his time as the head coach in Chicago. He does get in his next 3 games, he does get chances to do so because he's at Detroit this week. Next week, he's at Minnesota. Then it's their bye week, and then he's home against the Lions. So in the next 4 weeks, we actually see the Bears twice. We take them on here before Thanksgiving, and then in early December, we will see them again. But he's yet to get a win against an NFC North opponent. So certainly, when you look at it on paper, a game where I think the Lions should feel pretty confident heading in, and in other games this year where they should were favored and were sort of expected to go in and beat opponents who were struggling, the Lions have been able to do so. So I'm expecting them to do something similar, to come in here and do that again. But it is a division rivalry game, and it'll be interesting to see how things play out because it's to Joe's point. There's that any given Sunday, especially when you're playing a division rival. But I think that we should see a Lions victory, hopefully. So let's make things official here, gentlemen. Of course, with Pick'em last week, Joe did decide to go with the Chargers, so that dropped Joe to 6-3. But just one game out. Me and Jeffrey are sitting there at 7-2, mirroring that Lions record. This week we have a choice between the Bears or Detroit. Who are you picking, gentlemen? Are you going with Chicago or Detroit in this one on Sunday? Let's start with you, Joe. You got the Bears or the Lions?
I'm picking the Lions. They're gonna go to 8-2, and that they're gonna be ready for a big lead in the division. We have to wait a couple weeks for Minnesota to go on the bye, but if Minnesota plays how they've played all season, they should pick up 1 or 2 more losses before they go on the bye. So what I'm saying is Detroit wins this football game. We create some space for Minnesota, and we'll have to worry a little bit less about them at the end of the season. But Detroit versus Chicago, first time this season, Detroit's going to get the victory.
I like it. And Edward here, black and blue. Just like the Bears will come out in this game, see a double-digit win this weekend as the defense steps up and gets the pressure going again. Looking to see a couple sacks this weekend and a defensive takeaway or two. And he thought, Joe, maybe you would be going sort of with the Bears in this one, but you're staying true, going with that Lions pick. Like to see it. Jeffrey, who do you have in this one?
Oh, your father has joined us.
Oh, he is here, and he's wondering if you need some IT help.
No, not from you.
And I assume this and lose twice is I don't know if that's the Bears losing twice, if that's the Lions losing twice. He says well, there you go. He says Bears to win, so he thinks the Lions will lose twice. I don't think that'll be the case.
Being awful silent. He wasn't here when we were talking, saying that we're going to lose this game. Came out there, got the big win. I'm going with the Lions again. We're going to roll these Bears. It's Bears season, not deer season.
And we've talked about maybe there'll be some week where we have to pick against the Lions, but that week is not this week. I'm going to stick with the Lions as well.
And when you pick against the Lions, I'm going to go with the Lions so I can try to make up my record.
Try and get back. I like it. I like it.
I like it.
But so we're all on board with the Lions. Edward's with us. My dad's going with the Bears. We'll have to see how things play out, but I think hopefully we'll be able to rejoin you on Tuesday of next week, since it is Thanksgiving, and be able to celebrate a Lions victory over the Bears, and look forward to what should be a Lions victory over the Packers on Thanksgiving. Spoiler alert: I am picking the Lions in that game against the Packers already. So. That is not the game where I'm going against Detroit. I think at home they should be able to handle them, especially on Thanksgiving. And we have just a little back and forth here, a little bit of playful. Pop's going to need some Kool-Aid for Christmas. The Grinch is back. But he is, I definitely like the Lions. Oh, no, that's my mom. Oh, sorry. My mom's jumping in here. But, my dad, on the other hand, Justin Fields will have a great game. He doesn't believe in the Packers, though. Nope, Packers suck. So, which is surprising because for the longest time we were both Packers fans. So, but they do. Jordan Love is not the guy.
The
unfortunately.
last time I saw you, you had a Packers paraphernalia on you. Made me sick.
I did have my Packers belt. That's a true statement. True statement. Well, we appreciate everybody for tuning in and contributing to the show. Like I said, we will be back Tuesday next week instead of Thursday for a special Thanksgiving episode because, of course, the Lions are playing on Thanksgiving Day, hosting the Green Bay Packers. So, again, hopefully we'll be able to celebrate a triumphant victory of the Lions over these Bears and be able to look forward to that Thanksgiving Day game against the Packers. Until then, you can catch us on your favorite channel. We're streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter. So whichever one of those platforms is your favorite, make sure you find the Lions Grid. Give our profile a like. And if you're on YouTube, you got to go ahead and ring that bell so you get notified when we're going live. The start time for Tuesday's episode will be 5:30. We have moved the Lions Grid. Traditionally it's been Thursdays at 7:30. We have moved up the start time now to 6 p.m. We had some changes in our schedules, so it made it so that we could get in here a little bit earlier and hopefully get things wrapped up before the kickoff of Thursday night football, so you don't feel, you don't have to skip the early parts of the game to watch us because I know we're a little bit more entertaining than your traditional Thursday night football matchups. Although tonight is a rather interesting game. AFC North matchup between the Bengals and the Ravens. So I'm actually looking forward to that matchup. But until next time, I'm Kevin Marheine. Joe, Jeff, thank you again for joining as always. Appreciate having you on. And hopefully when we reconvene on Tuesday, I won't sound all congested and stuff from the COVID, and I'll be back to 100%. So until then, thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll catch you next week, and have a good one. Go Lions!
Go Lions. Suck it, Kevin.